You're listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Now, it is time to break it down.
Welcome to episode number 35 of the Sonny Brown Breakdown. I'm your host, Sonny Brown, and in this episode, I talk to Denis Kelly. Now, Denis runs the Australian Combat Sports Academy in Melbourne, Victoria, here in Australia. And he's got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he's fought MMA professionally, he's got a black belt in Zendo Kai Karate, and he's trained with a lot of the legends of MMA all around the world. And I had this conversation with him towards the end of last year, right as the state of Victoria was getting out of a lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic, which at the time was, I believe, the world's longest lockdown, or one of the world's longest lockdowns. As I look into it a bit more after this episode, it seems like the lockdowns can mean different things at different places with varying levels of severity. But this one in Melbourne was a serious one. It was a long one because they were able to take an outbreak of coronavirus cases and bring it back down to zero, which I believe is the only place in the world that's been able to do that. So it went on for a good couple of months, and during that time they had curfews down there. They obviously weren't allowed to train, but Denis was, still running his online lessons during that time and, still persisting with the culture of the club. And that's kind of what I had this discussion with him about is, his takeaways and the lessons he learned from that experience in kind of running his club and running a gym and, building that kind of team morale that he's been able to do and kind of what kept him going throughout it all. So I thought it was a very interesting conversation with a kind of unique perspective on the whole situation. It's certainly not something that anyone wants to be going through, but if we can learn something from it, I think that's what we should be doing as martial artists, problem solving and learning these lessons. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. And if you do, if you want to send us any feedback, my email's sonnybrown@gmail.com, or follow me on Instagram, which is Sonny Brown Breakdown, and also the website, sonnybrown.net. And if you do enjoy it, also feel free to leave us a 5-star review. And without further ado, let's go to the podcast.
Mr. Kelly, how's it going, mate? How are you going?
Yeah, pretty good. Thanks, Sonny. Thanks for inviting me on the podcast. So,
hey, my pleasure.
I've really enjoyed listening to your other interviews. So glad to be on here. Honored to be on here.
No problem, mate. No problem at all. So, yeah, I mean, it's something we kind of thrown back and forth getting you on here before because we've known each other a while now. And I guess this year, right, you've gone through something pretty incredible that no one else in the world has, even with all the COVID pandemic, in that you have just come out of the world's longest lockdown in Melbourne, Victoria, 261 days all up of running your academy in these pandemic conditions that pretty much everyone around the world has experienced, but obviously not to that big of a degree. And so I want to get into that, get into your history and where you've come from and where things are going now. But I guess just briefly, you got back on the mats yesterday. Is that correct? And
So yesterday,
full contact.
So yesterday was the first day of returning to full contact training. So we haven't been allowed to do any sparring or grappling training. Pretty much since when was it? Since the end of March was like the last time anybody had really rolled. So we had a few weeks in the middle, in between the first wave and the second wave, where the gym was opened back up again. But we were only allowed to do like solo training and drilling with dummies. And I think actually before then we had a few weeks where we were only allowed to train outside, and that was in the middle of the winter over here. So that wasn't much fun. And then the second wave hit. So then we were off for all of, what was it, like August, September, October, most of November. And then, so Monday was the first day that everybody was allowed to roll again. So everyone was super excited about that. It's a good feeling to be back in there.
I could imagine a bit of relief and, smiles all around, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it was just, trying to make sure people don't go too hard and burn themselves out after
Yep.
a 9-month layoff. So
yeah, we had the same thing here, but that was like 6 months ago. We went through, through that. So I'm wondering, maybe we can just start off if we'll get to that later and just go through just a bit of your history in the martial arts, which I know is actually pretty in depth, right? Because it seemed to be whenever I speak to you, you've trained with a lot of the best guys, around the world. You've got a lot of experience in all different martial arts. I mean, yourself now, how many black belts do you currently have?
So I've got my main one is, and it's actually the first black belt I got was in BJJ. So I got that in 2012, and then I also got my black belt in judo, I think 2 years ago, and karate about 2 years ago as well. So judo and karate I had been doing, a long time ago, like for much longer than jiu-jitsu actually. But then I never really made it to black belt in them. So I thought, once I got my black belt in BJJ, I thought I'll go back and try to finish the job off. I thought I was already up to brown belt, I think, in both of them. But it actually turned out that it took a lot of work to get the last little bit there. So yeah, so those are my main three. And then I'm like a qualified instructor, like black belt level in Krav Maga and kickboxing as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
So a dedicated lifelong martial artist, we shall say.
Yeah. So I've been doing it like pretty much since I was, I think, 14. That's when I first got into it. And then I've been doing it ever since. I've only really been doing it full time in the last, just over 11 years. So before then I was just doing it in my own time as, maybe teaching a little bit here and there, but yeah, really just turned full time about 10 years ago, and yeah, dedicated myself to it completely since then.
And so how did you start off? Because I know a lot of the people that you have trained with were involved in the early days of mixed martial arts. Like, you had some good stories, kind of like in the Pride era of people that you've been training with, and what were some of those highlights, or how did that all take place in those days?
Well, I mean, I suppose I think I first really started training in MMA, even, it wasn't really even called MMA back then, but I first really did probably my first MMA class was probably around 1998. And I'd already been doing, karate and all this stuff for a few years before then. But I think, compared to these days, I think it was a much smaller sort of scene. Like not everybody, no one really knew what mixed martial arts or what, MMA or they used to call it no holds barred fighting and stuff was back then. So it was a much smaller sort of scene. Everybody just kind of knew everybody. And, yeah. So I think, the first place that I really started doing mixed martial arts training was at the Pancrase Academy in London. And that was my first, one of my first instructors was the coach there. And yeah, I mean, that was probably one of the first MMA clubs in Europe as well at that time. And I was lucky enough to be there in the early days.
And so, yeah, what was that like then? What kind of training were you guys doing? Is it, I imagine it's going to be pretty rough and raw stuff, but...
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, I think one of the things that was strange about it back then was a lot of the people who came in to train, they didn't really even know what sport we were training for. You just heard, right, there's this type of martial art where you can do anything you want. It's almost like obviously there was rules, but people they'd done a little bit of boxing or they'd done a little bit of wrestling, and they hadn't really seen the UFC or anything, but they just heard this is a good workout and this is, you get to spar with people and, do whatever. So yeah, it attracted like a big mix of different types of people back in those days. Whereas I think now it's become a more mainstream sport. So I think you get a lot of people who they basically start doing MMA training or any other kind of martial arts training with the idea of, I want to fight in the UFC one day. Whereas back then I think it attracted people who just wanted to fight in the gym or in the class, but probably that was going to be as far as it went.
And yeah, and it's an interesting distinction between the change in the culture, obviously, across that length of time.
Definitely.
And I know you did some training with Chris Brennan as well. That was was that in America that you went to and trained?
Yeah. Yes. So I went to live in Chris Brennan's gym in, what year was that? 2002. So that was, I had It was, I think, just about 2 years after I, finished at university. I got like a full-time job, and around the same time I got a job and got a kind of career. I started taking my training more and more seriously. I don't know if I was really thinking about competing in MMA that much, but I just thought I want to, take it to the next level and see what I can do. It wasn't really, I think back in those days, it seemed a bit unrealistic to want to fight in MMA. Like it's hard to believe it now, but if you think back to that year, that was 2002, there was probably only like 5 UFC events that whole year. And there was, maybe 4 or 5 Pride events that year. So only if you were the best of the best of the best, you got to fight in those events. And it's not like UFC has an event every weekend now. So there's, more opportunities. But yeah, basically that was one of the few places where you could actually go and live in the academy and kind of train every day. And so I quit my job, and myself and one of my friends moved over there for like, I think 3 months, and we lived at the gym. And there was basically, they had like one relatively small room, but they had, people from all different countries all living there. And we'd all just like wake up in the morning class. Then we'd go to another gym to do like some weight training and then come back and do all the evening classes. And we pretty much did that every day for 3 months. And actually, I think just the first week that we got there, Chris had just come back from fighting Gomi in Shudo that same time.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
that's living the life.
Yeah. I mean, and to be honest, one of the things that happened was towards the end of it, I just sort of, I don't know if, I can't really remember if I had a dream of becoming a full-time fighter, but probably by a month and a half into it, I just gave up on my dream of becoming a full-time fighter, because I thought I don't really want to live in a gym and train like this every day. So I thought I'll go back. I ended up moving back I had always intended to move back to London anyway, because we were only there for a 3-month visa. But I sort of decided now I'll move back, I'll work full time, and I'll do my training in the evening and see, try to do it that way instead.
Yeah. That's, I guess, the grim reality of, living in a gym and training hardcore every day and kind of.
I think we used to eat McDonald's every night as well, because you just get so bored of being in the same place. And, so we just go sit in McDonald's for like 2 hours every night after the training was finished. So, the reality of the fighter lifestyle didn't really live up to it.
And fair enough. And one interesting thing, I guess, with Chris Brennan is that he was the first no-gi academy, strictly no-gi academy in America, right? Which probably everyone probably assumes Eddie Bravo, but was Chris Brennan's gym. They were doing it before everyone else. Yeah.
So I think actually the time when I was there, there was quite a few people who trained there who also trained with Eddie Bravo, but that was before Eddie Bravo had his own school. So I think he just trained at the Machado headquarters, and then he taught private lessons. But Chris Brennan had already been, like, I think there was other no-gi grappling schools, but he was the first one to do exclusively like no-gi BJJ. And he's had already had a lot of experience at that stage. He'd fought in the UFC, fought in Shuro, and he originally began his training with with Royce and Hori and Gracie. Then he moved and lived in Brazil for a few years. So he was super experienced, and he's actually like a lot of his people that he trained have gone on to do pretty well and have gone on to teach other people who've done well. So.
Yeah, and I see I think it's his son now in Bellator or...
Bellator, yeah. And I think his older son might be on his way to qualifying for the American team for the Olympics for freestyle wrestling as well. So, he's got super credentials.
So, that would have been a great experience, obviously, then learning from them. But you decide you had enough of that. You moved back to England, and then what other stops along the way were there for you in your development?
So I moved back to London again, and then I was there for quite a few years after that. And at that time I was training at the Carlson Gracie London Academy. So I'd actually been training at the Carlson Gracie Academy before I went to America as well. But it was a really good school. It's probably, I think it might be one of the biggest BJJ academies in Europe right now, like in terms of members and stuff like that. But yeah, it was really good because I think one of the good things about it was like any Brazilian person who came to London, that was always their first stop. So they all, they all visited the gym. So you were exposed to like a lot of new techniques and new styles coming through all the time. And they just had like a really strong, kind of competitive culture as well, which I haven't really seen. Like, not really, it was quite competitive in the gym, but if there was a competition, like almost everybody in the gym would go in. Like if there was a big competition, everybody would compete. So, compared to, like in a normal jiu-jitsu academy, I'd say you probably got like maybe 5% of the people are competitors and then the rest of them are recreational. Whereas, back there it was like everybody competed, even if they, you thought, this guy's probably not going to do too well, but they just sort of felt I suppose it's like peer pressure or whatever. So, but it was good though, because it gives you, a lot of good training partners.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting about that era is that a lot of people training, or maybe the majority, were competitive and were training to do mixed martial arts as well, right? And that's
definitely.
You were competing in mixed martial arts as well, and I wonder maybe if you take us through like your first fight or those kind of early days of how that took place.
Yeah, so I was actually competing in amateur MMA with a few different rule sets. So some of them there was no head strikes, and then actually the amateur pancrase events, which my original instructor used to run. So they allowed kicks to the head. I think they allowed kicks to the head and knees to the head, but no punches to the head. And then there was other amateur events where it was just like body shots and no strikes to the head at all. So I had quite a few of them. I probably had like all up, you go to the event and you'd maybe have like 3 or 4 matches in one day. So all up, I probably had about, close to 40 of those types of matches. Yeah, as I said, I think when I went to America, and I just saw as well how far ahead their level was compared to us, like in terms of their grappling and everything, especially grappling. Striking wasn't too much of a difference to the UK, but I think that kind of put me off the idea of wanting to fight professionally, because I just thought it would take so much, work to get up to that standard. But then I think a few years later, or maybe like probably about a year after getting back from America, I think the MMA competition scene became a bit more popular in the UK, and then there was like opportunities that came along to fight. So I thought, jump in, I'll have a go. And actually, I lost my first pro fight by knockout, and then I had I was like, it was a bad idea.
Yeah.
And then I got another chance then a few months later to go and fight in Italy, and then I won that fight by submission, and then I kind of went on a good winning streak then for a few years after that. And then I never really seen it as like a long-term career. It was just something that, I thought this is, I was in my mid-20s. I thought this is a good way to kind of test your martial arts skills and I think it's, sort of like an incentive to keep improving as well, because you've got a fight coming up, so you keep pushing yourself and improving, whereas maybe you wouldn't improve so much if you didn't have a goal or something like that to go for. So I just sort of saw it as it's a good way to keep improving. And I think every fight that I had, I thought, all right, if I get through this one, okay. Like if I get through it without getting hurt, this will be my last one. I'll never do it again. And then if I win the fight and I go, that was pretty good. Maybe I'll have one more. And then it kind of gets addictive like that. And then
I know that.
Yeah.
And I guess what are some of the, obviously you've been there in the kind of early raw days of it, and now you're running your own academy down in Melbourne. What is that, what is the kind of differences you see, especially with young fighters coming in, the kind of the expectations they have on professional fighting, and, how differently you kind of got to run things to kind of maybe meet those expectations, or perhaps dissuade those expectations that some people come in with,
Yeah, well, I think there's probably 2 sides to it. I think that in some ways, maybe people who are just getting into fighting, or who are like, want to be fighters at this present time, I think they've got like a little bit of an advantage that we didn't have back in those days, because now you can sort of see there's a lot more, you can find out a lot more about the sport. You can find out about what the fights look like, what the opponents look like, even what kind of training you should be doing. Whereas, like when I had my first my first really amateur MMA fight was in 2000, so that's 20 years ago. So the sport was changing every year, or even like within the course of a year. So the techniques that worked 6 months ago won't really work, next year. And then it was changing all the time. So it was a lot more unpredictable. Whereas now, at least I think that if you're a new fighter getting into it, you can almost tell exactly what you need to do to be successful. So if that makes sense. But I think that, probably the other side of it is that I think that if people are just getting into it and they want to be a fighter, they probably don't really see everything that's going to go into it. So you see the people who are successful, you see Conor McGregor doing this and that, and you think, if I just keep training, that'll be me as well. But they don't really see all the extra work, or maybe probably what I would say is like they don't see the boring stuff that goes into it. That's what I would say. So I remember, this is something that has always made me think about. I think when the UFC started doing those, I can't remember what they're called, but I think it's like Countdown to UFC, where they would show the trainers fighting. So I don't think I think they just started doing them maybe like around the time when Rich Franklin was going to fight maybe Chuck Liddell or something like that. So they hadn't really done those kind of documentaries before. And in the documentary, or in the lead up, so Countdown to UFC 64, whatever it was, they can't really just show people doing jiu-jitsu and then hitting pads and then sparring, because it gets boring. So you have to show, we'll show Rich Franklin doing Pilates, or we'll show, Conor McGregor doing yoga, so that the producers and the promoters, they have to find ways to make it look exciting. But if you actually saw what those guys are doing every day, it would be too boring. And that's what a lot of aspiring fighters probably don't really see. So they don't really see the boring 10 years of working on guard passes, or 10 years of doing footwork drills. So, yeah.
Yeah. I remember they're great series, those ones, because, someone like myself would be, watching it, trying to pick up any tips. And then you'd see BJ Penn getting a rock to sink him to the bottom. And running across the bottom of the ocean floor, carrying the rock. And I'm like, wow, that's what I got to do. That's the secret. That's the secret to get BJ Penn's, cardio and flexibility and the whole package. You just got to get that and run across the ocean floor.
Yeah, I mean, the amazing thing is there probably is a lot of people that they just do watch those things and they think, well, that's what BJ Penn's doing, so that's what I should do as well. Or that I've seen Conor McGregor doing this, so I'll act like this, or do this kind of training as well. So, but you in reality, because I've had a bit of experience with John Kavanagh and their team as well. So I know that their training is going to be pretty serious, and it's going to be like the most effective. It's basically not going to be the fun stuff that looks good on TV.
Yeah. And then how do you then build that into a fighter's routine if they're coming in? They've seen UFC, they want to get on television, they want to be a UFC fighter. How do you slowly break the news to them that you've got to practice your defense, footwork, takedowns, passing for 3 years before you're probably going to be at a higher level?
Well, I'd say, I think that's always going to be the tough thing where, that's the reason that not everybody is going to be able to make it really, is that, most people, I think anybody can probably do, maybe like 6 months of hard training, or they can train up and have one amateur fight, but it's who's going to be able to consistently do that for years and years and years. Say you look at someone like Demian Maia, who's how hard he's probably had to train for all his jiu-jitsu matches throughout his jiu-jitsu career, and then he switches to MMA, and then he consistently does the same training for MMA for years and years and years. And he didn't really, you could say, like, even with his last fights, it's not like he deteriorated. He's still putting in the same effort over and over again. So, not everybody is going to be able to do that. And that's the reality. But that's why usually in a fight, there's a winner and a loser, because chances are the guy who's the winner is the guy who's put in all that effort, and the other guy's the one that didn't to try to take a shortcut somewhere along the way.
Yeah, very good point about the ability to do it consistently over a long period of time, because something I was actually thinking about the other day is just how many people you see, especially on social media, when they just get into fighting. Most people will be happy to, follow me on my journey on my athlete page or whatever it is, and that's they're about that life, posting all the time, and there's a lot that I can think of where it's like, well, they're not still doing it. They dropped off somewhere along the way, and it's not that uncommon, of course. But
and I think the tough thing as well is that people don't realize is that you put in all that effort, and then if you get a good result, if you win a fight, then your reward is that then you get a tougher opponent the next time. Mm-hmm. So then you have to put in twice as much effort, and then you have to keep consistently doing that, fighting better and better people until you eventually get to the top. And then when you get to the top, then you have to fight the very best guys over and over again. So yeah, I think that's the, I think you can't really build that into a person. A person has either got that kind of, that attitude where they're prepared to keep making that kind of consistent effort over and over again over years and years and years, or they haven't. And I think that's probably one of the things where, because MMA is so popular now and the UFC is so popular, it's probably going to attract people who, they just want to get famous for anything. Like, I'll get famous, they'll be a star on Instagram, whatever, but they're probably not the type of people that are going to consistently put in that effort over the long term.
Yeah, it is such a hazardous sport to get into if you're just looking for fame, or because no matter what happens at the end of the day, there's someone waiting with a shin kick to the head, or, a straight
definitely.
right cross that not a lot of other hobbies that you could be undertaking to get famous are gonna be there with. You release a bad music album, maybe it doesn't sell. You release a bad right hook that gets weaved and you get knocked out. That's a pretty dire consequence.
And I think something else that people don't really realize the danger with fighting is that I think with other sports, like if you were quite good at football or tennis, but then you slowly deteriorate, you're probably not going to get invited back to the big matches or to the big tournaments or whatever. Whereas with fighting, as long as if you used to be a good fighter 10 years ago, you'll still get invited back to get knocked out by the next up and coming kid.
Yeah.
And it's easy, you can see like promoters probably sweet talk the guy to get him in there, and you get your career back on the road, and so that's the downside of it that people miss out on.
Yeah, I know about that. It's really it's a cutthroat business at the end of the day. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It's tough, and you don't want to be filled with those illusions of just fame, fortune, and glamour. Which, hey, I'm sure it's there for the top 1%. They get it, but even then, they still I think it was Robert Whittaker saying that he missed Christmas. Was training Christmas Day every day for 5 years or something. Just wanted a break. Like,
on the way to get there.
On the way to get there. So that's got to be tough. And so what do you kind of do then in your gym to help build a bit of a community atmosphere that people will want to. It's not that people will want to stay there and train and stick it out, and it's not going to, to turn them away. Obviously, you don't want to just be, hey, this is too tough a sport for anyone. You still want to be encouraging for those people who think they could do it.
Yeah, well, I think obviously it's going to be tough. Like training for a sport like this is going to be tough, and you're probably not going to, there's probably going to be days when you don't feel like doing it, or you don't want to turn up and, get beat up by your training partners. But yeah, I think that it is really important to have a balance with, sort of fun. Maybe fun's not the right word for it, but, the training has to be enjoyable as well as being effective. Like maybe it's not enjoyable all the time, but there has to be like a certain amount of enjoyment to it, because otherwise I think people just won't, they probably won't consistently do it. another thing that I sort of think happens probably too much is that people, maybe they've got a fight coming up and they train really hard in the fight camp leading up to it, and they probably burn themselves out, or they're probably getting hit too hard, maybe sparring too much or whatever, and then they have the fight, and then after that, they kind of lose interest and they stay away for too long, and then it's hard to get back into the swing of it again. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, something that we've noticed in recent years is like nearly every time one of our people has a fight, they're pretty much straight back in the gym like the next week. So we sometimes tell them have a week off, but usually everybody's straight back in the gym, because I think it shows that they've got a lot of friends at the gym. We've got a good culture. So if they're away for too long, they feel like they're missing out.
Yeah,
so
okay.
I think that's a big part of it. Whereas if it was just a matter of like just smashing people to make them tough, they probably wouldn't want to come in. So I know I've trained at places like that before, where I was like, no, train's too hard here. I don't really look forward to it. I know it's for my own good, but in some ways I feel like I can't really, if I have to push myself to go there, it's probably counterproductive. So yeah, I think it's just important to have that balance between making it enjoyable, having a good atmosphere and kind of culture, but also making sure that the training is effective as well.
Yeah, and I guess that's a big thing, is making the effective training fun, which I think is something maybe we'll put a pin in it and come back to, because I'm thinking now you're talking about, having enjoyment in your training, being able to turn up every day. And that reminds me now of the lockdown that you've just gone through, the 261 days, 8.5 months of this no contact online training that you've been doing, and just how you kind of, with that in mind, how you were able to get through it. Because for me, I guess it was maybe 2 months off roughly, but we had the time off where we were doing the online Zoom, the Zoom classes that everyone was doing. And that was, look, at the time, no one knew what was happening. So we were all just making the best we could out of the situation. Everyone was rushing to we better get YouTube videos up, and where everyone's thinking about what we're going to be doing. And so we're doing the Zoom classes, and then eventually we had it was 2 weeks of the bag training, like we could come back but no contact, and we're doing bag drills, and that's something that we probably should probably do more of anyway, because some of my fundamentals definitely improved. But when we finally got the all clear to go back to full contact training, I was I'm thinking, thank you, I'm a bit over this no contact bag training. I don't know how much more I could do of it, honestly. I'm just thankful that we're allowed to get back. I'm just, grateful. Other parts of the world were still locked down. Just thank you. Just grateful. Be done with it. And we've been very lucky in this state ever since, where, it was just basic contact tracing, temperature checks, increased cleaning, but training's been going on pretty much as normal. And then without going into, I guess, the specifics of what happened down in Melbourne, but there was a second outbreak, and then the Premier decided to put everything into a hard lockdown, and which you guys have come out of now. But there was a point there where I was on Facebook, I think, and I saw you one morning. You're putting the warm-ups online on Facebook, and you're there in front of the bag, still doing it. And it's probably like 6 months after I'd stopped. And I was thinking, it was just like, wow, I got to be thankful. I got to be thankful for that we're able to do what we want. I actually said that to some people and said, guys, just be grateful. Like Denis is down there just like a soldier, like a warrior, still going with that stuff. Like, we just got to be thankful for what we've got up here. And I kind of I was looking at it as a bit of inspiration. Obviously, I'm like, damn, you're doing those drills in the bag so take me through the kind of what kept you going, what kept you motivated to do it, what kept your community together. Because there was sometimes I was seeing the screenshots of your Zoom classes, and you were still getting, those the ones I saw, there was 20 people there doing the kickboxing or something. I was like, wow, that's impressive. So take me through, Denis. How did you keep going? How did that all go down? And what was going on during that time?
Yeah, well, I think during the first lockdown, so I think that all started in April, and obviously it was a big shock to everybody. And like we just sort of felt like we'd sort of finally, because we've been running the gym now for about 10 years. I think it's just about 10 years. And it was actually like a year and a half ago, or it would have been a year, or probably just over a year ago then, that we moved to our new bigger place. Everything we've got like a really, pretty good team of fighters and competitors now. We'd had one of our fighters, Annie, won a world title last year, and all this other stuff had been going on. So everything was going in the right direction. And then just then, locked on, everything's kind of closed on. And I suppose a lot of people were sort of thinking the same thing. Like, what if, this might put us out of business? What's going to happen with all that? So it was a big, big shock to everyone. And, I think maybe the first week or so, we weren't really too sure what to do. And then we got into running the online classes. In the first lockdown, Philip Lai, runs the gym with me, who's the Muay Thai coach. So he did a lot more of the online classes, the Muay Thai striking classes. And yes, you probably saw, I think he was, sometimes he's getting like 40 people doing his online sessions. So yeah, but I think with the online sessions for striking are always going to be like you're always going to get more people for them than for the jiu-jitsu ones. So yeah, for the first lockdown, we sort of concentrated on that. I think I was just doing like one jiu-jitsu session, online jiu-jitsu session a week. But yeah, it's kind of, or at least then it seemed like it was hard to generate the same kind of interest in doing virtual jiu-jitsu as it was to doing virtual striking.
Yep.
But I mean, yeah, I think we really felt like we got a lot of support from our members. Just the fact that everybody was willing to that time during the week to all train together and see each other on the screen and stuff. So then when the second lockdown happened, or when we opened up again, it felt like it was actually weeks of preparing the gym to open up again.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think we were in there for like 4 weeks, fixing everything up, making it all nice and shiny, and doing repairs and refurbishing everything to make it really nice for when people could come back to training again. And then I think we're like a week and a half into opening up, and we still weren't allowed to do contact training. It was still just solo drills and training with dummies that we were allowed to do during that week and a half. Then everything got shut down again for the second wave. So then it was a case of bringing the dummies or the punch bag or the weights back to home. And then the second time around, then I set up sort of a temporary area in my garage to do the online classes from. But yeah, I think, we got, as I said, we got like a lot of, just seeing how motivated all our members were to continue training. I think that sort of motivated us to want to keep making the effort as well. So yeah, got there in the end.
Yeah. And so we know, like, around the world now, some places are going back into another lockdown, and maybe there's some gym owners considering, going back to the online class model. What would be some tips that you learned from doing it? What would your recommendations be for people out there?
Well, I mean, I suppose it's going to be different for everybody, but I think especially during the second lockdown, the second sort of wave of it, I really just focused on beginners, like complete beginners, because I think that people who have already been doing jiu-jitsu for a while and they want to do bare and belows and they want to do like, M&RE rolls, you can't do any of that stuff with a dummy. So unless you've got a training partner to do it with, then, and if you're, I think like a lot of the more advanced or more experienced jiu-jitsu people will probably just meet up and drill with one of their friends, behind closed doors anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So really the second time around, we just focused on the pure beginners, just showed them, right, this is mount position. This is how to do arm lock from mount. This is how to do Americana from mount. This is side control. So just going back over all that beginner stuff, which is actually easy to do on a dummy. And in some ways as well, what I found is that it's probably easier for beginners to learn it on a dummy because they're not worried about accidentally breaking the other new guy's arm on the first day. So they don't mind, doing it slightly wrong. And so, yeah, basically the second time around, I just focused on, we're going to do 2 jiu-jitsu classes a week. but it's perfect for people who've never done jiu-jitsu before, who just want to, so that then when this is all over, when the lockdown's over and we can start training again, all of you guys, we're going to have 30 new white belts that will be ready to jump into jiu-jitsu classes. So that was my sort of strategy for it. And I think that's worked pretty well.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. And so that did follow on. You had the new people come up.
It's only been, we've only done one beginner class so far, which was yesterday. But for the last 2 weeks when we were still doing solo drilling with the dummies, we've had a whole fresh batch of new people. So mostly members who were already members of the gym, but had only done the kickboxing and boxing classes before. But it's been a common sort of theme with our gym right since the beginning that we don't really, it seems that everybody who does jiu-jitsu, they started off coming in just to do the striking classes. And then once they do striking for a while, they look over to the other mat and then they see, that guy's doing an arm bar. Maybe I'll try that one day. Yep. So it basically filters in from there. But we just kind of use this as an opportunity to filter even more people all in there in one go. Yeah. So, kind of made the best of the opportunity.
No, definitely. And that's got me thinking, I wonder if even, we know a lot of people are intimidated to come into the gyms for their first lesson, and you can try and make that every gym, I'm sure, has their own way of making that as a comfortable transition as possible, with beginners classes and things like that. But I'm thinking that even could be a way, take people through their warm-ups online, a week or two, and then they could, they get even more confidence by the time they come in. They don't have to, cross that barrier.
Yeah, well, it is definitely, it's an important thing because it's something that I've learned a lot about speaking to other kind of martial arts business owners and stuff over the years, is that if you're a martial arts instructor, basically you're surrounded by it all the time. You don't really realize how intimidating it is for a complete new person. So I think the number one thing is they're afraid of looking stupid. So if they don't know what to do, and one good example I think someone told me is that if you've got a beginner's jiu-jitsu class and it's you've got a new guy who's never done any training before, and then a common part of the warm up might be, all right, now do a forward roll. And then he has to do a forward roll in front of 20 other people all looking at him, and he's wearing funny pajamas, and it's a nightmare for a lot of people. But if you're part of the jiu-jitsu community, you don't really see where that could be a big issue for someone. So I think, it is a common thing where a lot of people will be put off right at the beginning. And then if they had just stuck around for a little bit longer, they suddenly find out, this isn't so bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause you do realize quick, of course, no one really cares if you can't do a forward roll or no one's paying attention, but it's obviously always hard to know that yourself in the moment. It's always, everyone's everyone, everyone can tell that this is my first lesson.
Yeah, that I shouldn't be here.
That I shouldn't be here, that I don't belong, it's common. Yeah. So that's a good way of looking at it. To just focus on the beginners, as you said. The advanced people are probably doing it, maybe going to the local speakeasy rolling place or something. But I think that's a good way to then obviously build a bit of a return business for when you do open back up, and then just focusing all on the basics of techniques and things like that, right?
Yeah, because I think with the majority of jiu-jitsu people, the reason that they're doing jiu-jitsu is, if they've been doing it more than 1 year, it's because they like the physical contact of it. So really no amount of online drilling is going to replace that for them. But for people who are in the, 0 to 1 year range, those are the people who probably can benefit from from training with dummies and getting stuff explained to them. And they'll probably, if they're doing it properly, they'll benefit from it when they do get back to, or when they first start doing real physical training.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the training that I was doing. And when we got back into rolling, I found like my bullfighter Toriando pass, my footwork was on point, my S-mount transitions were on point. I'd never been sharper with those few things that we'd been going through repetitions. And at the time, Liam Reznikov was letting us know that, if you look on letting everyone look at Andre Galvao, he'd be doing his solo drills all the time, and like there's obviously the benefit to doing those drills. What was did you find that yourself, or like was there anything that you thought, I should be doing this all the time, or that you enjoy doing, perhaps?
Well, I'd say one of the things, I've done a few seminars on the Gymnastica Naturale.
Yep.
I'm not even really sure if that's how you pronounce it, but the sort of BJJ cross yoga.
Yeah, I was doing a bit of that. I was doing a bit of that too. And in fact, one of the guys, Dave Badland at Lang's MMA, was doing it out of his garage, and he coined the Australian version of Gymnastica Naturale, which was garage flopaboutomus.
Flopaboutomus, that's even better. Yeah,
go on, sorry.
Yeah, so I was like, because I'd learned some of that previously in the past, and then like other sort of different movements that would be good for warm ups, but I'd never really consistently put them into my classes, because I try to have like a same kind of class structure for all the sessions. So I think that was doing the online classes. It worked really well with that, where we would do like 10 minutes of just those specific jiu-jitsu sort of specific warm-ups. And I think a lot of it really does help with the mobility and the type of movements that you're going to be doing. So I think that's something I'll definitely keep as a part of the classes from now on.
Yeah.
And it was a good chance to actually go back over it and practice a lot and explain it and figure out which bits were difficult and which bits were easy to get, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And so taking that away from it, then was there anything else that you kind of found? What kept you going was there nothing else to do, or this was the only option to keep the business going, or like, was there anything that just kept you motivated? Because I don't know what all the other gyms were doing down there, but like another option would have been, right, just to stop doing the classes and just wait till things get back to normal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of places did do that. They just kind of, shut their doors and then told people, once training resumes again, then we'll open back up again. So, right from the beginning, we're probably a bit worried that, this could be the end. Like if things, I think everybody at the beginning, when the first lockdown started, I think I was like checking on Google every day for when the vaccine. I was like, maybe the vaccine will be out next week, and then it was like that. That was 9 months ago already. I thought maybe this will only last for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I think if we had have known how long it was going to last, it probably would have been even scarier, and we would have thought there's no way we can survive this. But we managed to get through it. We managed to like come to agreement with our landlord, and we actually didn't charge any memberships throughout the whole time as well. Just in the second lockdown, we said, we'll if people want to do our online sessions, we did like the kind of really reduced membership that people can. And we got like nearly all of the members supported us and kept going with that one. So I think the fact that we just got so much like support from our members, that's what really inspired us to want to, keep making the effort and get to the other side. And I think it sort of feels like we've got through this big struggle together. So then you're even more determined to keep building and achieving even more together as well. Whereas I would imagine that if you were, as I suppose you can't really blame people, but if people just shut their doors and they blame the government and they blame this and they blame that, and then I think that sort of sets a different sort of tone for when you open back up again. So I think that obviously it's been a tough, it's been a tough year, but I think that now we've really got that feeling of everybody's glad to be back together again. We've got that optimism about, what we can do in the future.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess that kind of brings us back to that community atmosphere that you do build into your gym. And maybe that will take us also back to like the making the drills fun and making training fun people while learning the essential skills. Because I mean, the best way to build the community, I guess, and make people want to keep coming is like you were saying, is it's got to be fun that they're having. That even the average person's having fun, and the pro fighter can have their moments of fun between the Shark Tank rounds and when weight cutting. So what are some ways, like, just to make you do to help foster that?
Well, I suppose I think a lot of it just comes down to like the attitude of the like the attitude of the coaches as well. Like there's a lot of different things we can, do games or whatever. But I think a lot of it just comes down to, to me, I've always just really enjoyed my martial arts training. And I see it as, obviously I take it very seriously, and, people are fighting, we take it seriously, but I see it mostly as an enjoyable, fun activity. So I think sometimes people get kind of caught up in the, it's like a life or death struggle, and you're defending yourself from samurais or ninjas or whatever. Whereas the reality is that, it's really what we're doing is play fighting, and it's just elaborate form of play fighting. So I think that if you can keep that attitude, then that sort of transfers into your classes and into your training, and people tend to enjoy it more. And, I think when there's gyms, or, what I've seen in my experience is like when it becomes too competitive, when the coach is basically, pushing that kind of win at all costs mentality, I think it's okay for a little while. You get good short-term results, but then you tend to find that like the fighters are sort of maybe sabotaging each other because they want the coach's attention. So this guy doesn't want to spar with this guy. This person doesn't want to roll with this person. This person doesn't want to show the other person their moves because everybody's fighting for that number one spot. And then eventually it all falls apart, and, everybody leaves and goes their own separate ways. And then it's like starting from scratch again. So I think, making sure that it's more of kind of cooperative community is usually going to work out better. Yeah,
and it seems maybe counterintuitive though, but as if everyone is helping each other and having fun, there is going to be better competitors can come from that, or maybe a more consistent or a wider range of competitors can come from it. I mean, not necessarily better, because the sink or swim mentality with the room full of the toughest people in the world is going to produce a pretty damn good competitor, but it might be just the one or two or three or four at the top, right? While the whole range of people get left behind.
Yeah. And I think as well that, something that, when you look at like the definition of like high performance in other sports is being able to do it consistently. So being able to win championships or win titles, but rather than just being a one-off, like having a team that can do it, this year and then the next year and then a few years after that again and again. I think it's hard to do it consistently if it's just people bashing each other every day to prove who's number one. If people are bashing every day to prove who's number one, then you can probably produce one or two good fighters, but then eventually everybody gets injured. Nobody wants to turn up to train, and then it all, disappears. Whereas if you think more long term, and that's the way I think, because I've been doing martial arts for like however long, 25 years now, and I want to keep doing it for a lot longer. So I want to be here for the long term and keep producing fighters that are gonna do well. So
and I think everyone maybe has seen that or has been around where like the new guy, maybe not necessarily a new guy, but someone who's keen to get in there, then has a rough day against the enforcer or someone who's gone a bit too hard on them, and it stunts them. You might not see him again, or you can tell that it's like it was just no one benefited from it. He didn't, the high skilled person now just lost a training partner, a potential, good training partner in the future, even if they weren't at that stage. And someone else is not training anymore and no longer maybe doing the martial arts, or maybe they've just gone somewhere else. And that, I mean, that's something I try and get through is that, you want all your training partners to get better, because that's going to then make you better. And it seems obvious maybe, but it's difficult when it is such a competitive sport and people don't want to lose those rounds in the gym. It's ADCC night in the gym, and that's, that's the be all and end all to kind of get that through, that, hey, if someone, you can let someone know that they're always making the same mistake that you're catching them with, And yeah, that's going to shut down that opportunity for you to catch him. But by them knowing that, you'll have to improve your setups and everything like that. And
so then everybody benefits from it.
Yeah. That's a big one, because I know, the idea of, and I've seen it, someone will just, they've got their secret move that they're just hanging on to for too long, you gotta let it go.
Yeah.
Keep improving.
Yeah, and then I think when you factor in, like, so it's bad enough with just grappling, but then when you factor in like striking and people getting punched and kicked in the head and sparring, then that's a whole new level to it, where you can't really, if you have that kind of overly competitive environment, it's just not really going to end up too well. Yeah, so I think that's one of the things to really avoid. But as I think it's something that I think John Will has said this in a lot of the seminars I've been to, where you have a rule, or maybe, I don't know if he might have a different word for it, but saying like, maybe not rules, but guidelines for what the culture should be, but you need to keep reinforcing them. So if you just have the rule, you say like, 5 years ago, we told people not to go too hard in sparring.
Yep.
Probably not going to work. So you need to be continuously, reinforcing it, saying, this is why we're doing this, and the reason, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. So it's something that you have to, stay on top of, I think.
Yeah. And not worry about sounding like a broken record sometimes, because that's something where I'll be like, I'll sometimes qualify something before I say it, like, you probably heard me say it, or, you probably all know this already. But the reality is that probably just needs to be said again.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. If things need to be said, you probably need to repeat them a lot.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that sometimes the first time someone hears it, it might not make any sense to them, or it might not be relevant. And then maybe, a year and a half later, then they realize, that's what Sonny was talking about when he said, don't go for neck cranks when someone's like 20 kilos lighter than you.
Nothing wrong with a couple of cranks, mate.
Yeah.
but no, obviously keeping training partners safe, and like that's something now. It's like it's a crank, not a tap. Is like trying to get into everyone. If someone says that, then you got to sit and troubleshoot. You got to troubleshoot why it was a crank, not a tap. You both got to sort it out together. You can't just go, it's a crank, not a tap, and walk off.
So it doesn't count, yeah.
Yeah, like it doesn't count. It was a crank, not a tap, not a choke. And then that's the end of it. You got to troubleshoot. Take a little moment and say where the pressure was on the neck, and like try and fix it. And then everyone gets better, And then,
then everyone will benefit from it.
Yeah. And so, one other thing then, maybe just to finish up, is, you've got that culture coming into, say someone comes to Denis, they want to be a pro fighter, maybe, no experience. Let's say they're young, so they're not, you don't have to give them the talk that the natural Randy Couture was maybe an exception to the rule of 40-year-old fighters. What do you tell them? How do you set their expectations? What kind of guidance do you give them to start off with, and what kind of things can they expect and you anticipate that they might run into?
Well, I suppose, probably something that we really stress, especially with MMA fighters, and it's something I think that people miss, is just how much you have to be well-rounded. So, basically you're going to have to do a lot of striking training, Muay Thai or boxing. You're going to have to be good at takedowns, so doing wrestling or judo, and you're going to have to be good on the ground, which means doing a lot of BJJ. And you'll probably be better at one or the other of one of those things. But basically you have to put in a lot of time to get good at all of them. So it's not really good, because you do see people coming through that are really only good at one thing. But I think in the modern MMA world, it's only going to get you so far. So you'll probably get into like you probably do well enough in your own local scene to get into the prelim stages of the UFC, but you're never probably going to get beyond that. So it's just stressing, like it's going to take a lot, it's going to take a lot of training to get really good at these, at least takedown, striking, and ground fighting. So be prepared to put in all that work. I'd probably tell them, don't worry too much about all the sparring. You have to do a bit of sparring to get good at it. But the more you spar, the shorter your career is going to be. So focus more on the technical side of it. And be prepared to put in a lot of work because, I would say that I think I wouldn't say it's easy to get into the UFC or to get into like the highest level in MMA, but there's so many events, there's so many people dropping out or getting injured, there's reality shows, there's so many avenues to get into it now that it is possible.
Yeah.
It is possible for almost anybody. If you can train relatively hard for about 2 years, you can probably get there. But do you just want to get there, or do you want to be one of the top 10? Do you want to be the champion? If you just want to get there and say that you fought in the UFC, it's probably not, it's probably doable. But if that's, if you want to go beyond that, then it's going to take a lot more work.
Yeah. And there's going to be a rough day at some point in your future if that is the goal, right? So a lot of time to put in. The young kid, should he quit his job, skip uni, just come and train at your place full time?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. I mean, because as I said, it's like obviously to get good at all those individual sports or all those individual kind of martial arts styles, it's going to be time consuming. But yeah, I would always say that, as I would advise people, don't quit your day job. I would use, my general advice is until you're getting paid the same amount per year as a fighter as what you would be getting from your job. You probably should be getting paid more really, but yeah, it doesn't make sense to quit your job. And, just in general, like, as I said, if you're going to be getting good, if you need to get to a really good level at jiu-jitsu, striking and takedowns, that's going to cost money. So it's not like, if you look at, Rocky 3, where there's like poor kids turning up at the neighborhood gym and they pay like $1. That's realistically, that's not going to happen anywhere in the world. So you're probably, unless you're already a really good, well-rounded martial artist, you're probably going to have to pay someone to teach you. And it's going to be very difficult to do that if you don't have a job. Then there's a lot of other expenses. You're probably not really going to get paid for your first, unless you're getting paid to lose, you're probably not going to get paid much for your first 10 or 15 fights. If you're always low on money, if you're always broke, you'll probably have to take short notice fights just to pay the bills. And those short notice fights are probably going to be the ones where you get knocked out or you get an injury, and then that sets back your career. Yeah, so there's a lot of good reasons not to quit your job to focus on fighting. On top of that, I would say that nearly everybody who does fight, they don't really make enough money from it to sustain them for the rest of their life. I think a lot of people think that I'll have a few fights, then I'll just open up my gym and then I'll be set for life. People will want to come and train with me because I've had a few fights, but usually that doesn't work out because, I tend to find that the sort of personality or the type of person that's well suited to fighting is usually the opposite, that's well suited to being a good instructor or a good, a successful coach. Because I think to be a fighter, you have to be very self-centered and all the spotlight's on you. And if you're a coach, basically, no one really cares who you are. They just want to know, what can you do for me? Can you teach me how to fight? Can you teach me how to, do this kick or that kick? So if you're, the better you are at fighting, probably the worse you're going to be at coaching, I would say, in general.
It's a tough life. It's a tough sport. Full of many difficult decisions. And maybe just then to wrap us up to bring us back to fun, enjoyment. What is it for you personally now that you're looking forward to working on in the martial arts? You're getting back there in the gym. What's your optimistic thing that, even if it's a technique, what's keeping you excited, keeping you going now in the actual martial arts itself that the gym's just open? What do you look forward to?
What I'm looking forward to. So like I've spent a lot of this year, pretty much this entire year, just like researching, studying videos. I've got like years and years of notes from my own training, from seminars, and I've been going back over it and, reorganizing it and, specifically like a lot of MMA specific stuff. So really, I'm just looking forward to teaching that to people and, getting them to, and then usually I find that, I go back over stuff, I learn it, I relearn it, and then I teach it to people. And then once I teach it to people, then I see, I figure out different things about it. We should do this differently. We should do that differently. Or if I taught it in this sequence rather than in this sequence, people would get it a lot more quickly. So yeah, just looking forward to putting all that into play. And then usually you see the results of it a few months later.
I love it. Sounds like the martial arts way, the constant refinement in the pursuit of excellence. It's just, you're living it, Denis. You're living it.
Hopefully, so hopefully we can keep going.
Man, I hope so too. Things are looking positive here, at least in Australia. So yeah, obviously there's different changing situation all around the world, but I think, you've given some good advice and some, maybe a good role model if any other gym owners are struggling or anyone needs some inspiration, because as it stands, you've done more pandemic coronavirus lockdown training than anyone, man.
Than anybody in the world. Yeah.
Anybody in the world.
Like
yeah. That's one world title, I'm sure.
Pandemic champions.
Yeah. You may not have expected, but hey, it's
got there.
It's got there, mate. Got there. So congratulations, and good stuff with the gym.
Thank you.
People want to get in touch with you. What's the best way to go about it, or anything else you want to mention?
So if people are looking for a gym, just look for Australian Combat Sports Academy. So we're based in Melbourne, and I've got my if you check out my Facebook page. So I've got the Denis Kelly MMA coaching, but recently I've been putting a lot more stuff on my own personal page, because I don't really understand how Facebook works, but I think if you do post it on business related ones, no one sees it. If you do it on your personal ones, everybody sees it.
They want you to pay on the business one. That's it.
So I've been going down more the personal page road recently.
Mm-hmm. And so Australian Combat Sports Academy, if you're in Melbourne and you've just come out of lockdown, maybe you want to get back in shape. And,
that's the place to.
That's the place to be. Well, thanks so much, mate. Really appreciate it. All
right. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, mate. My pleasure.
I enjoyed it.
My pleasure. And we'll do it again in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks
a
Denis.
lot.
Peace, mate.
All right.
You have been listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Until next time, you can visit sonnybrown.net to find out more ways to break it down.